Hi, and welcome back to our next mastery series at Tradesmart University. Today we're talking about a subject that I think you're really going to enjoy, and that is straddles and strangles. So I've titled this lesson, Strangle Your Options, Not Your Broker. It's kind of a, a play on words, but maybe it's a good idea not to get upset with your broker, but to ask yourself, how can I become a better trader? A lot of times we get upset with a person, and it's really just about expanding our strategy and understanding more about the market. So here's what we're going to learn today. We're going to talk about what I call the almost perfect strategy, and that is the straddle and the strangle. You're going to understand that here in the first chunk, and then you're going to see why it's almost perfect as we look at the downside of the almost perfect strategy. And then we're going to look at some trading opportunities. I've got 4 specific trade opportunities that I want to share with you. We're going to talk about the possible pitfalls, and then we'll look at some setups and how you can implement this in your own trades. So let's get going with the almost perfect strategy. So here's the scenario. Take a look at this trade here. We've got a trade that's in a triangle. And if you're familiar with what we teach about triangles, triangles are a consolidation pattern. The symmetrical triangle, like you see here on the screen, is specifically a neutral pattern. It could break bullish, it could break bearish. Statistically speaking, it's about 50-50. So whenever you see a symmetrical triangle like this, you have to say this thing could go either direction. So if you take a look at this, you say it could break out to the upside, it could break out to the downside. Since it's a triangle, we understand that we can take this first iteration right here, this first cycle, and we can say we expect whatever the size of that, which in this case is about $10, we can expect that whenever this triangle breaks out, it's going to move about $10. So if we break out about 118, our target's going to be up here about 128. If it breaks down to the bearish side here, let's say we break out about 114, we're going to have a target of about 104. So we've got a really good move coming. We just don't know which way the trade is going to break. Now, historically, if you've gone through our foundations classes, we've talked about this trade and said just set a trigger, set a contingency order on the outside of the triangle. So whenever the trade breaks out, it triggers your trade and you get into it. Here's the challenge. If you wait for it to trigger, you may be getting in at, maybe 119, maybe 120, and so you're missing a good chunk of the move. Or if you're doing it on the downside, let's say you were to set that trigger today, you'd be getting in maybe at 114, maybe 113. So you're waiting for that extra confirmation, but you're missing a good portion of additional move that could be happening if, for example, you could go ahead and get into the trade today. Again, the challenge is you don't know which way the trade's going. So what are you going to do? Well, here's my question. Can you do both? If you're using an option, you could do both. You could buy a call and you could buy a put. And if we did that, we'd be set up for success, right? Well, that's the idea of this strategy that we call a strangle or a straddle. So what we're going to do here is we say, hey, I buy a call option. That's a great idea. Now, if the stock goes up, I make a profit. And I'm going to buy a put option. Hey, that's a great idea. If the stock goes down, I'll make a profit. And whichever way the trade breaks out, I'll sell the other half and not worry about it. It's the perfect trade, right? Well, almost. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let me show you how these two trades set up. It's really the same trade. In both scenarios, the straddle or the strangle, we're setting up a situation where you buy both a call and a put option. There's one distinction, and that is which strike price you buy. So when we look at the straddle, we're going to buy both the call and the put of, you ready for this? The same strike price. That is the distinction. The straddle is the same strike price. And think about this as though you're sitting on a fence. So you got a fence here, you drop your legs over the fence, you got one leg on each side of the fence, but you got the same pivot point in the middle there, that is the fence. That's called the straddle. You're straddling a fence. Think about it that way. So we're straddling the strike price here. And with this particular trade, you've got equal odds that either position is going to be a winner. So it's a pretty straight up trade here. Let's take a look here. Let's zoom in on it. And take a look over here at this straddle. Notice that I've set this up with the 115 strike price. So we're going to buy both a 115 call option and a 115 put option. Now if the trade goes down below 115, great, we're making money on the put. If the stock goes up above 115, great, we're making money on the call. We don't really care. I've heard some people call this a chicken trade because you don't care. You just, no, whichever way, right? It seems like it's the perfect trade. Again, we'll talk about the downside in just a minute. If you set it up like this, though, it's called a straddle. You got one strike price, and you got a call and a put, a leg on either side of that straddle there. Notice this risk profile. Look, if you're right in the middle, there's the 115. And so if the stock goes up, look across the bottom here, there's the stock movement. Stock goes up, your profit's going to go up on your call I'll just write that in there. That's the call side. Stock goes down below 115. Your profit's going to go up on the put side. That's hard to write at that angle. And so that's going to be your risk profile for the trade. And then, of course, the only way you could reach absolute maximum risk, the only way is if at expiration, this trade expired exactly at $115. It's the only way. If it's at $115.50, you won't reach maximum risk. If it's at $114.50, you will not reach maximum risk. The only way you can reach maximum risk is if it actually closes exactly spot on the actual strike price there. Again, that's called the straddle. Now let's take a look over here at the other variation. This is what we call a strangle. And the distinction here is, again, we're buying both a call and a put, but we're buying opposing strike prices. Normally, we even go so far as to say they are one out of the money either direction of the trade. That's normally what we refer to here. Now, in the old days when we only had $5 and $10 increments, we would simply say, you buy the 120 and the 115, and that's one strike price apart. Today, with a lot of ETFs, we have $1 increments or even 50-cent increments, so sometimes we'll spread that out. But the idea here is that it's not the same strike price. You're buying one out of the money either direction that you're going here. Again, you have equal odds that these positions will both be winners here. So either one's going to win. Either the call's going to win or the put's going to win. But both of them, of course, cannot win. Take a look at the strangle here on the screen. Notice what I've done. I've bought one out of the money call option. I've done the 118 on this picture here. And we've got one out of the money put option. We've got the 114 here. So compare that with what I had done with the straddle. The straddle, remember, I did the 115 call and the 115 put. That was the straddle right there in the middle. Well, get rid of that. The strangle, the idea is that you're coming in from both sides. So remember, what does a spouse do if they're really upset with you? They want to strangle you, as opposed to if you fall on a fence, you're going to straddle the fence. That's the way you can remember this. Strangle is coming in from each side, like two hands coming in. And the straddle is one leg on each side. Same principle here. Take a look over here at the risk profile and notice the distinction here. We've got the 118 strike price and the 114 strike price. And notice we've widened the base of where we could reach the maximum risk. So that's the distinction here. With the straddle, you have to land right on the money in order to reach maximum risk. With the strangle, you can land somewhere between that range. So here I've done a range of 114 to 118. So if this if this stock closes at expiration between 114 and 118, you're going to reach maximum risk on this trade. But as long as the trade's going up above 118, you're going to have a profit on the call. As long as the trade's going down below 114, you're going to have a profit on the put. And that's this strategy. That's the way it sets up here. We got two variations, the straddle and the strangle. And again, it's set up for a neutral trade. You don't know which way it's going to break, but you do know it is going to break, and you want to be positioned for both of them, both the call and the put. And this is what we call the straddle and strangle. It's almost perfect. But in the next section here, you're going to see why it's not quite perfect.